Dina Kishawi. I am a senior at DePaul University, majoring in cognitive neuroscience.
I'm Natalie Leem. I'm the SI leader for CSC 300 Data Structures in Java 1. My session, I try to incorporate marker paths a lot. That's something that I do with the students quite often because I feel that it helps them to write out the code rather than to just look at it on a screen. Another activity that I came up with just for the session was having the students kind of act out different sort algorithms that we learned in class. So I had half the students line up unsorted and then had the other half of the students tell them how they should move in correspondence to the algorithm such that they became sorted. So we just sorted each other by height. And then we switched and did a different sort algorithm with the other half of students being unsorted and the other students telling them how to move. So those were the two main things that I did. At the very end, I tried to do a quick brainstorming portion where we came up with ideas for what to cover for final exam review. So those are the three that I incorporated in that session.
So from previous SI sessions, I learned that the setting up the scenarios helps them to apply what they learned in class with things that are going to show up on the test. So like we did this similar thing with predicting exam questions, which is another learning process. And we figured out that like obviously it's historically worked for bio, especially for this section, so just to reinforce those learning processes. And then also based on like the dynamic of the kids that are here, they took them a while to become engaged, so that's why I had them starting in small groups and then sort of funneling into a larger group activity. So yeah, with the collaborative learning processes, I wanted to start off with something that made them think individually first and then sort of get into a larger group and then use that, and then that way they can sort of gain confidence in their answers and then speak up. So it's not so much passive and like me lecturing, it's more of them, here's what we learned, how do we apply what we learned.
I think students tend to take away from my session the ability to write code by themselves and not just depend on what the professor gives them. I feel like in this class in particular, there was a lot of just them being handed the code and handed the algorithms, and they didn't really have to come up with it themselves or write it themselves. The professor did most of that like on the board as a class or by himself. So I try to have the students be independent in that sense and understand that they have the ability to write these things out by themselves. I think they also come out with like a more concrete understanding about how these things that we're learning actually apply to the real world and how they actually work. So like whenever I do activities where they act out a data structure or they act out an algorithm, it's because I want them to see how things are actually working under the hood, because if you just look at the lines of code, it can be a little bit over your head, not very concrete and really abstract. But by getting the students involved and having them participate in these ways, I think that they get a really concrete understanding of what's really going on and what this code actually does. Well, I definitely think that a lot of it has to do with kind of learning about your students a little bit. I definitely feel like my first couple sessions as an SI leader and the first sessions that I have in a quarter are a little bit more stiff, a little bit more simple. But as soon as I start to get a feel for my students and see what they're comfortable with, what they need, you can kind of think, well, how can I do something that they would find fun, but also incorporate different skills and like have them learn new things as well. So I know that my students this quarter were really open to acting out things, really open to like coming up and, you know, moving around. So I was able to have that freedom to have them act out things or do stuff like that. Also just thinking like, I did a lot of reflecting, thinking when I was in this class, what did I find confusing, and trying to incorporate that into an activity that will help students, since as an SI leader, you have that extra experience and you know, well, this is going to be important later down the line, or maybe this isn't going to be so important, so we don't have to stress it so much. So just bringing your own experience to the table and definitely keeping in mind your students' preferences as well.